I've reached my limit, and it's a wake-up call for us both. This moment demands that we either face our challenges together and strive for change, or accept that we might be better off separately. Reaching my limit means acknowledging that our relationship can no longer sustain its current state. This is the time to decide if we're willing to work on our issues, or if it's time to reevaluate our connection. To say I've reached my limit is to admit that I've exhausted my patience and need to see a genuine effort from both of us. This moment will define whether we move forward or part ways. When I say I've reached my limit, it's not just a statement of frustration, but a call for us to reassess our relationship. This is an opportunity to either mend our bond or recognize that we may need to separate. Reaching my limit signifies that I can no longer accept the status quo. It's a crucial time for us to decide if we can address our problems and find a new path forward, or if it's time to go our separate ways. I've reached my limit, and it's a clear indication that we need to confront the issues that have been driving us apart. This is a pivotal moment for us to either rebuild our relationship or accept that it might be time to move on. To say I've reached my limit is to recognize that we've reached a critical point in our relationship. It's a chance for us to either work through our difficulties or understand that we may be heading towards an end. When I say I've reached my limit, it means I've come to a point where I need to see if we can address our problems constructively. This moment is about deciding if we can heal and grow together, or if it's best to part ways. Reaching my limit means I've reached the end of my patience, and am ready to see if we can make real changes. It's a moment of truth for us to either work on our relationship or acknowledge that we may be better apart. I've reached my limit, and it's a sign that we need to have an honest discussion about our future. This is a critical time for us to either overcome our challenges together or recognize that it might be time to move on. To say I've reached my limit is to understand that our relationship needs a major shift. It's a chance for us to either confront our issues and work through them, or accept that we may need to part ways. When I say I've reached my limit, it's a declaration that I can no longer tolerate the current state of our relationship. This moment is for us to decide if we can address our problems or if it's time to move on. Reaching my limit means I've come to the realization that our relationship requires significant changes. It's an opportunity for us to either confront our issues or accept that it might be time to reevaluate our connection. I've reached my limit, and it's a crucial moment where we need to assess our relationship. This is a chance to either work through our problems together or recognize that it might be best to go our separate ways. To say I've reached my limit is to admit that I've reached a point where I need to see if we can make real progress. This moment will determine whether we can rebuild our relationship or if it's time to move on. When I say I've reached my limit, it means I'm ready to face the reality of our situation. This is a pivotal moment for us to either address our issues and find a way forward, or acknowledge that it might be best to part ways. Reaching my limit signifies that I've reached a point where I need to see if we can work through our challenges. This is an opportunity for us to either heal and grow together or accept that it might be time to move on. I've reached my limit, and it's an indication that our relationship needs a fresh perspective. This moment is about deciding if we can overcome our difficulties or if it's best to reevaluate our future. To say, I've reached my limit, is to recognize that we've come to a crucial juncture in our relationship. It's a time for us to either confront our issues directly or understand that it might be best to part ways. When I say, I've reached my limit, it means I'm ready to see if we can address our problems or if it's time to accept that our relationship may not be salvageable. This is a moment of truth for us both. Reaching my limit means I've reached the end of my ability to tolerate the current state of our relationship. It's an opportunity for us to either work on our issues together or recognize that it might be time to move on. I've reached my limit, and it's a signal that we need to have a serious conversation about our future. This is a chance for us to either address our problems and find a way forward or acknowledge that it might be best to part ways. To say, I've reached my limit is to admit that our relationship needs a fundamental change. It's a time for us to either confront our challenges and work through them or accept that it might be time to move on. I've reached my limit, and it's not about anger or frustration anymore. It's about recognizing that we need to redefine our boundaries if we want to move forward together. Our relationship is at a crossroads, and understanding this moment could change everything. Reaching my limit means I've finally come to terms with my own needs and desires. It's not just about what we've been through, but also about where we go from here. This is a turning point for us. When I say I've reached my limit, it's not a cry for help, but a declaration that we need to address the underlying issues that have been festering. It's time for us to confront the truth and decide our future. Reaching my limit signifies that I've acknowledged the emotional toll our relationship has taken on me. It's a moment of clarity that could either push us apart or bring us closer if we face it honestly. I've reached my limit, and it's not just about the struggles we've faced, but about how we've handled them. This is a pivotal moment where we need to decide if we're committed to overcoming these obstacles together. To say I've reached my limit is to admit that I've given everything I can, and now need to see if you're ready to give the same. It's a test of our commitment and our willingness to grow together. Reaching my limit means I've realized that continuing down this path will only lead to more pain. It's time for us to reassess our priorities and find a way to heal or part ways with respect. When I've reached my limit, it means I'm at a point where I can no longer ignore the cracks in our relationship. This is the moment for us to either mend what's broken or accept that it might be time to let go. I've reached my limit, and it's a signal that we need to engage in a deep, honest conversation about where we stand. This is the time for vulnerability and truth, to either rebuild or understand our limits. Reaching my limit means that I am no longer able to tolerate the status quo. It's an invitation for us to address the core issues and make a decision about our future based on mutual understanding. I've reached my limit, and it's a moment of truth where we both need to reflect on our actions and their impact on each other. This is where we decide if we can reconcile our differences or if it's time to part ways. To reach my limit is to accept that I can no longer ignore the growing distance between us. It's a call for us to either confront our issues head on or acknowledge that we may be better off apart. When I say I've reached my limit, it's because I've come to understand the depth of our struggles and am ready to face them. This moment is crucial for deciding if we can overcome these challenges together. Reaching my limit means acknowledging that our relationship has reached a crucial juncture. It's a time for us to reassess our commitment and decide if we're willing to work through our differences. I've reached my limit, and it's not just about how I feel, but about how our relationship has evolved. This is a moment for us to determine if we can find a new path forward or if we need to go separate ways. To say I've reached my limit is to recognize that our relationship needs a change. It's an opportunity for us to either address the issues we've been avoiding or acknowledge that we might be at an end. Reaching my limit means I'm ready to have a serious conversation about our future. It's a chance for us to either rebuild our relationship with renewed commitment or understand that we may need to move on. When I've reached my limit, it means I've realized that something fundamental needs to change. This is our moment to decide if we can adapt and grow together, or if it's time to reevaluate our relationship. I've reached my limit, and it's an indication that we need to confront our issues directly. It's a call for both of us to be honest about our feelings and decide if we're willing to work through our challenges. Reaching my limit means I'm at a point where I can no longer ignore the problems we face. This is a critical juncture for us to either address our issues or accept that we may be better off apart. To say I've reached my limit is to admit that our relationship needs a fundamental change. It's a time for us to reflect on what we truly want and whether we can achieve it together or separately. I've reached my limit, and it's a sign that we need to reassess our relationship. It's a moment for us to either find a way to heal and move forward or recognize that we may be heading in different directions. When I say I've reached my limit, it's not about giving up, but about understanding that we need to address the core issues that have been affecting us. This is the time for us to make a crucial decision about our future.